You are listening to More Than a Sniff, a weekly podcast of Western States Canine College. I'm Joe, owner and principal trainer here with my colleagues Chris, Michelle, and Shannon. Today, we are going to talk about
7 myths. There's tons of myths about dog training, but I've pulled together 7 that I typically have heard going into private lessons. We're just going to kind of talk about it and just kind of squash the myth. And talk a little bit about some of the training techniques behind it or philosophies behind it. So the first one is old dogs can't learn new things. And I'm going to make a statement here, and then I'm going to pass it over to Michelle on her thoughts on that, is age and breed should never be an excuse for bad behavior. So Michelle, what's your thoughts on old dogs learning new things?
I think that myth is absolutely ridiculous. The older the dog gets, I think the more mature they get, the more control they have of themselves. So it's actually, I honestly find it way easier to train my Papillon right now than I ever have either of my other 2 dogs. And it's just because he is in control of himself. In fact, we just started teaching him to ring a bell just on more because we think it's cute than anything. We actually have a dog door, so we don't need him to do it for that or anything. But he caught on in 3 minutes. And he has never, ever done target training. My other 2 have done target training their whole lives, and it is still a process every time getting them to start the targeting over again. So I think that is absolutely ridiculous to even think that way.
Shannon, do you feel like training an old dog, is there some different things that we should look at overall as far as old dogs and treats and just kind of a different picture for them?
Depends a lot. People find it hard to train a dog something new sometimes if they don't know the history of what the dog learned before, or if you trained them to do something a specific way and then you're changing the whole picture and asking them to do it a different way. It's a whole different mental process for them to, just like a human is. Like if you take your shoes off every day when you come in the house and then all of a sudden something happens with your house and you have to wear your shoes all the way through to the back door and take your shoes off at the back door, it's really hard to remember. And that's the same for the dog. They're learning how to do it a different way and trying to remember, oh yeah, I'm not supposed to do it that way. As far as treats and that kind of stuff goes, your dog can have a different metabolism as they get older. And so you have to be careful with your calorie intake to not put them in that overweight by over treating when you're training.
I think it's all so true. I find it a little bit more rewarding with old dogs because they have a thought process to it, and instead of just this chaos, woo, let's do this and let's do that, they really sometimes you have to convince them that it's good to do, but their thought process is definitely super fun to watch, and sometimes you have to move a little bit slower, but it's super fun to train older dogs. So the next theory that we're going to bust is it's just a puppy. So, they're biting, chewing on things, or we're just not going to train until they're 6 to 8 months old because they're just a puppy. Shannon, what's your thoughts on that?
Having had a puppy from the minute it was born, puppies can learn a lot. I feel personally that when you're going and getting a puppy from a breeder, they're sending them home somewhere in between 8 to 12 weeks usually. And that puppy, when you go get it, should already know how to sit, lie down, not have accidents in the house. My little puppy had 1 accident in the house his whole life. They are really, really smart and they can learn really fast. You have to do your training in little teeny chunks, like maybe 5-minute chunks instead of 15-minute chunks because they're ADD, as a tiny dog. But they can learn a lot and hold a lot of training knowledge, good foundation knowledge when they're at really small, 8 to 12 weeks.
Michelle, what do you find the most challenging when you head into a home that they have waited because we wanted to get through puppyhood?
At that point, we're dealing with behavioral issues instead of just basic fun obedience training. If you start out doing the the behavioral stuff in the beginning, you never have to correct those problems, like the biting and the chewing and stuff and the pottying. So at that point, we're dealing with a behavioral issue instead of just an actual fun training session. A little bit to add on to Shannon's, dogs or puppies are extremely, extremely smart. That being said, there are some puppies that it does take them a little longer to develop and actually get connection and be able to, like, eyesight to see you with obedient stuff. So it is a little harder. You do have to take into consideration that. That being said, of course, you should be training. It should just be training to the age instead of waiting.
So this is a big one, and back to how do you play with your dog and what that looks like, and everybody tends to want to play tug of war, and then they get told that you should never play tug. And I see it all over the internet. You should never play tug of war with your dog. And then people all of a sudden stop. And then when I'm asking them, how do you play with your dog? What does that look like? And they're like, well, we don't because we can't play tug of war. And it's always been a big question, like, why can't you play tug of war? And so then I get, well, it makes them aggressive. So Michelle, what's your thoughts on tug?
I can say in our household, we play a lot of tug. It's a really great release for my bigger dog. He absolutely loves it. And this is what I tell every pet parent. I've had that question get brought up a lot, is if they should allow their puppy to play tug. If you have kids, I think you should definitely start with drop it a lot earlier than any other thing. That your dog should know drop it before you play with tug of war. Because kids don't know when to stop, and the puppy doesn't know when to stop if the kid doesn't know when to stop. And sometimes you have to step in and tell the dog to drop it. My dog has always, he knows drop it. And if he doesn't, he's going to get pinched in the mouth for it. Which at this point, that's obviously not an issue, but I think it's a great stress reliever for a lot of dogs. It's a great way to play. Just be safe about it.
Shannon, have you ever seen a dog that you can pinpoint that, well, it's aggressive because they played tug of war with it?
I can't think of a dog that I think that the aggression stems from playing a game. I think that the rules of the game have to be clear to the dog, because a dog will think something's a game that you don't think is. So like stealing your shoe and running around the house, the dog might think that's the funnest game in the world. And you might teach them a game where they can take something and run around with it, and then when it's time to stop, they have to stop. So I think the rule of the game is important in the control of how it's played, but I can't think of any game that I've played with my dog that led to an aggressive or inappropriate behavior.
I've got one client that, coming back to the rules of the game, is they have a daughter who's got some learning disabilities, and she likes the dog to chase her, and she likes to chase the dog. And as a puppy, she became very mouthy about it. And so we now have the chase game of, when this toy comes out, she puts the toy in her mouth, and then we can play chase. And that's the same with tug. We have our tug toys with them, so there's definite rules of, this is what we play tug with, this is what we play chase with. And that has helped her daughter kind of understand like what the game is, but it also helps the dog stay in control of itself, so it's not causing problems. But tug of war does not cause aggression. If the dog has aggression problems and there's a behavioral problem with aggression, then definitely tug of war will bring that out, but it doesn't make a dog aggressive. So let's talk about house training. You house train your dog by rubbing their nose in its mess. And this is one that goes back way back, but to me it's funny because it's still coming up. And every dog trainer is going to go, no, you don't do that, but it's still out there, and people don't feel good about it, but they what do they do? And so, Michelle, talk to us a little bit about house training and what's the proper response if you catch your dog going to the bathroom.
Well, first, dogs and puppies, especially when you first get them and get them into your house, you should set a routine and prevent the accidents from happening. They should be set on bathroom break times and feeding times. A lot of training. I really feel a lot of training is preventing stuff from happening in the first place. But I mean, rubbing your dog's nose in it, I don't even know what that would do. I really don't. Like, make the dog afraid of you. That's the only thing I can think of that would do. Yeah, right. And then your dog stinks, and yeah, exactly. So now every time it goes to the bathroom, it has to get a bath, and then it's going to hate the bath. That sounds great. If you catch your dog peeing, make a loud noise and take the dog outside. Scare the dog in the action of it, not after, because it's just going to scare it from you.
And just like, Shannon, as far as you from the get-go, you set up those things, and Louis had one accident. I think that's about all I had with my dogs is one accident. And I can honestly say those accidents were probably my fault of just getting distracted. And so rubbing the nose in it makes really big negative associations, and it doesn't, the dog has to go to the bathroom. So now is it afraid to go to the bathroom outside because of something's going to happen? So definitely making sure that should never happen. Don't do that. This is another big one. You have to be more alpha than your dog. Shannon, talk to me about that and what your relationship with Louis is and just where he fits in your family as far as personality goes.
I think people have this idea that when you're the alpha, like you're this mean, strict, angry being that's like so scary that everyone just obeys all the time. And that's like not what the alpha is at all. I kind of like to think of it as the mom, like your mom loves you and is nice to you all the time and plays with you and takes you to dinner. And then when you do something wrong, gets upset about it. And that's like just really all that alpha is. You go out in the world, you get the food, you bring it home. When you're home, you're together, you sleep, you play, you do everything together. And it's just like a relationship with your dog. So that's just what I have with Louis. I go away, I bring home food, we play together, we sleep together, we cuddle together, and that's just what being the alpha is. You're just like, I'm in charge. Everything's going to be okay. As long as I'm around, I'm going to protect you. I'm going to feed you, and you don't have to worry about anything except for just being a dog. And then whatever job you give the dog to do, then that's their job. But if your job is to do everything else, pretty much.
So I wish that terminology would not exist, because it's more about being a leader. And that's what our moms are. That's what adults should be to kids. And that's what we as dog owners should be to our dogs is we're the leader. We keep them safe. We protect, we feed, we survive together kind of a thing. Because alpha, knowing Michelle, I bet that I'm going to pass this over to Michelle and let her take over, but I bet you Michelle's more alpha than her mom. And so, Michelle, talk to me about that and what your mom did with you. And then I'm also going to bet that Murphy is probably more alpha than you. And I say that because of the relationship that started with you two and where it has evolved. So this funny alpha word is really misleading as to what we do with it.
Yeah, the alpha word really does need to go away. I have lots of feelings about that part of training. I think there's a lot of really great techniques that people use that are alpha training techniques, but there's just no way for anybody to actually live the lifestyle of being the alpha wolf. If you really think about it, break it down, it's just not possible because, like Shannon says, you do want to cuddle your puppies and you do want to let them on the bed on occasion and stuff. So it honestly is a crazy concept. I would say that, yes, I've always probably been a little bit more alpha than my mom, and I'm especially more alpha than my brother and sister by far. My family, my mom has always been more of a friend than an actual mom. And I'm not saying I have an amazing relationship with my mom.
But she didn't try and make you something that you shouldn't, or you weren't because you were alpha.
Right. Oh yeah. No, of course not. No, that's, yeah, for sure. As for mine and Murphy's relationship, it's funny you say that because I was actually this whole time thinking that I think Prudence is alpha. That I was actually going to get this out, my Cavalier. And I have always thought she was alpha over all of us. And it's never needed to be corrected because when you say alpha, people think of that in an aggressive way. And she's not. It's never been a problem because she just eats first, or over the other dogs, or she'll lay on top of our heads, which we think is actually cute. It's never been an issue. But she always comes first, always. Murphy is an alpha dog for sure. He's just his breed is for sure, and he's definitely more alpha than my husband. That's definitely for sure. But yeah,
Maybe I should have said that he's your equal.
yes, me and Murphy are definitely more equal for sure. That is probably very true. But even that being said, it's not really, me and him don't work as an alpha, not alpha team. We work as a team. We always not always. Me and him had a rough first year, but probably because we were fighting for alpha, honestly. And then we just decided that was not going to work. So we started working as a team.
Yeah, so alpha doesn't mean aggression, and there are some good techniques out there as far as, if you want to call them alpha techniques, but alpha doesn't mean aggressive. Look it up in the dictionary. It doesn't mean that you're beating everybody up and claiming the streets of anything. Right. Yep. And our oldest he's definitely alpha, but he's not. There's been some dogs that have pushed him to the point of he's pinned them. But he's not, it's not aggressive. There's no aggressive. There shouldn't be any aggressive. If you're aggressive, then you're reckless. And if you're reckless, then we can't survive as a pack. And so an alpha should be the leader. They should be the calming point. They should be the example of survival. So it's good. All right. This next one is my dog ignores me. And I hear that all the time. Well, they know it, but they're ignoring me. And I don't believe that dogs have that thought ball at all. I think they make other choices, but I don't think that they ignore. Shannon, what's your thoughts on that?
I think that dogs have priorities of what's the most interesting to them. And so if you're at home and your dog's in the yard and a guy on a scooter or unicycle, let's say, a guy on a unicycle rides by your house, that's probably the most interesting thing that will happen all day for the dog. And right at that exact second, you decide to go outside and make him come in for whatever reason. I don't know. It's bath time. So you're like, come have a bath, Louie. What is he want to choose? Go inside and have a bath or watch the guy on the unicycle? He's like, Shannon, you'll be here all day. This is our yard. The bathtub's always there, but the unicycle, I've never seen that before. So I think a lot of it has to do with prioritizing what's the most interesting and what's happening, because the dog always wants to choose what's most interesting over what's the most boring, and what you're going to have him do is going to just be most boring by default.
I just wanted to add on to that. It just made me laugh because I haven't heard that when a whole ton in training, but I used to get it all the time when I was a manager of a boarding facility. I bet you twice a week I would get somebody being like, well, my dog hated me because I left him here last time and he ignored me for 2 days after. Your dog was tired. He wasn't ignoring you. He found a comfy bed to go lay in, and it might have been weird. It might have been different than what he did before, but he was so mentally exhausted from being in a boarding facility for a week. Like, what do you expect to happen?
Yeah, and my other philosophy on that is maybe your dog really doesn't know what you're asking him to do, that you haven't trained in that environment. So come doesn't mean anything if I'm smelling a dead carcass on the side. If you haven't trained in it, your dog's not voluntarily saying, screw you, I'm going to go over here. They're saying, I don't really know what you're asking me to do, and my natural instincts are going to kick in. It's the unicycle. I'm going to watch this, and I get it, but we're safe. We're fine. There's no reason for me to be coming in. But he will come in once the unicycle's gone. He's going to come in, right? So they just don't have that. Ignoring is rude, mean. And I don't think a dog intentionally says, "No, I'm just going to be mean." You're just nothing to me unless you've trained that, unless you've encouraged that behavior. So, think about if you're feeling like you're being ignored, think about why you're feeling that way, and fix it. You can fix that feeling. This last one is kind of a catch-22. It's kind of a fascinating one from a training standpoint. But again, coming back to my initial statement of breed and age is no excuse for bad behavior. But, and I have used this statement. And this is, it's just the breed. Should we use that as an excuse or a myth that we can't train him to do this because of the breed of the dog? Or do we use the breed to train and we may have to shift our training a little bit to accomplish what we ultimately want to accomplish? So, Michelle, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Because, of course, I don't think... Well, we'll just use Murphy as an example. Being a herding dog, I'm never going to be able to train him not to chase sheep if he sees them. That's just not going to happen. But that being said, we can definitely work on his recall. And so once he's in that state. So I think a lot of it is working with the breed you have and knowing what you have. I know a lot of people, they don't because they get rescue dogs and stuff. But there's definitely different ways to approaching every problem and working with the dog on what it is doing and how to fix it.
So, Shannon, with Louie, being that he's a bully breed, is there ever a time that you accept a behavior because of the breed of him, or do you accept a behavior because of a personality of him? Or talk to me a little bit about that.
So let's start with unacceptable behaviors, right? Things that are not acceptable. Protecting food on the floor from me picking it up. So let's say we're having a party, everyone's over, we're having cocktail wieners, and somebody drops theirs on the floor, and then we go to pick it up, and he's like, well, everything on the floor is mine, and he turns into this gremlin that's like, I'm protecting all the food on the floor for me. Not acceptable. So it's more likely that he will do that because he's a bully breed, but that doesn't make it an acceptable behavior. And so knowing what your dog's hardwired to do lets you see the environment in a way where you can be predisposed to prevent them from failing, I would say. So like another example would be with a sight hound. If a bunny runs by, anything that goes fast, a kid, a scooter, they're going to go chase it. That's what they're hardwired to do. Go run after bunnies. So if you know that you're going to be walking the dog in a neighborhood where kids are going to be running across the street, maybe have your dog on a leash in that neighborhood, even though they might, and even maybe they have a good recall. If you know that you're going into an environment that's going to be challenging for what they're hardwired to do, then it's your responsibility to help them by preventing a bad situation.
Yeah, in the heading to the high school rodeos, everybody brings their dogs. And it's definitely a mini Aussie, mini healer world. It was fascinating to see all the minis everywhere. And then here comes 2 German Shepherds. And we're just, I get them out and walk them through everything. And everybody's so used to seeing a herding dog walking with people. And then all of a sudden there's this German Shepherd and people, whoa, and they make these comments. And I'm like, they're just as simple as, the next dog coming through. But I don't ever allow their breed to be an excuse for even other people. Don't touch this one because he's a pit bull. No, you can't touch this one because he's not quite social yet. Or, you shouldn't be using the breed for excusing behaviors or for reasons why, as much as, and I hear it a lot, it's just the breed. Sure, but it doesn't mean that it needs to be okay.
I actually have a great example of this from this last weekend. So my niece just got a husky puppy, and it was something that we talked about in length, that dog is going to have a hard recall, and probably might never be let off a leash its entire life. It's just the breed. No. But no, we talked about everything we had to do for training to get that dog to have a really good recall and what she needed to work on. And while we were hanging out at my mom's birthday party, her younger sister got really snotty with me about it. Because what we're doing right now is we're creating a lot of connection with my niece and the puppy, having the puppy always tied to her. The dog probably will be on a leash most of its life, so the dog has to accept a leash. And she also needs to learn from a really young age that she needs to stay in the vicinity of my niece. But my younger niece got really snotty with me about it because we were all inside and the puppy was still on a leash, and she just, oh man, it was bad. But but my younger niece actually was like, hey, Casey, maybe you should ask Michelle why this is going on. And I was like, Casey, I'm going to educate you about huskies right now. And because she's a husky, we are doing everything we can to prevent her running instincts to kick in. Like I said, it's probably going to be a long haul, but it's something we've started with her, and she's only 8 weeks old right now. So
yeah, you have to know, and even if you get a mixed breed, you kind of have an idea, maybe, and they're definitely, their characteristics come out, but the breed should never be an excuse. Well, it's a husky, so we're just going to let it run because that's what they do. We know it's a husky and we know that they are runners, so let's do everything we can to prevent that from happening. So all the myths out there, I think that you can find, every opinion out there as far as what you should and shouldn't do. But at the end of the day, there's really no excuse for bad behavior in dogs. So, and that's kind of the guts of this. And there's so many opportunities to train your dogs. So keep on training and don't let these myths get in your way. And also you can go to morethansit.com and sign up for our online training platform where you can learn all these skills and have it custom to you.
Thank you for listening. If you want to know more about us and our services, please visit our website at www.wsk9co.com. And as always, we urge you to get out and train.